Hello, and welcome to the AWS Summit. I'm Ulysses Cubios, Senior Business Development Manager with Amazon Web Services, leading our CMMC Customer Solutions program. Today, we're going to review the new DoD CMMC Compliance program, how it impacts your organization, and how AWS, with our solutions, will help you accelerate your CMMC certification. Let's start with a brief overview of the DoD Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework, otherwise known as CMMC, and the impact to the defense supply chain. The U.S. Defense Industrial Base, or the DIB, continues to experience an increasing number of cyber attacks. The loss of sensitive information and intellectual property costs the U.S. billions of dollars every year and directly impacts national security. There are many examples where U.S. weapon systems and the sensitive information from these programs were compromised by bad actors. Examples include the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the MQ-9 Reaper drone, the C-17 military transport aircraft, and others. The Defense Industrial Base and their subcontractors continue to be the targets of these cyber attacks. To address this threat, the U.S. Department of Defense identified the need to ensure that the DIB and the defense supply chain networks are protecting controlled unclassified information, or CUI, and have the appropriate levels of cybersecurity in place to protect against advanced persistent threats. The DoD also identified the need to ensure that contractor environments are verified and that they meet cybersecurity requirements. This is in contrast to current regulations where contractors are only required to provide an attestation that they meet the requirements in the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, also known as DFARS, specifically Clause 252.204-7012. On January 30th, 2020, the DoD Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment released the new Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework, also known as CMMC. And on March 18th, 2020, version 1.02 was released to address some corrections to the documents. Per the DoD, they envisioned CMMC to serve as a verification mechanism to ensure appropriate levels of cybersecurity practices and processes are in place to ensure basic cyber hygiene, as well as protect controlled unclassified information that resides on the department's industry partners' networks. With CMMC, to win new programs, the DIB and defense supply chain companies, their environment and processes will be required to be CMMC certified at level 1 or up to level 5. The required level will depend on the requirements of the program, the sensitivity of the information they will have access to, store, and manage, as well as cyber threats. According to the DoD, they estimate 300,000 plus contractors will need to be assessed by certified third-party assessment organizations and certified by the CMMC accreditation body. Let's look at the DoD CMMC organization and how they work with the supporting CMMC commercial entities. Looking at the top right box of the slide, we have the U.S. DoD Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, who defined the CMMC requirements, including the levels, capability domains, processes, and practices. Next, we have the CMMC accreditation body, or CMMC AB, a newly formed nonprofit organization who will be acting on behalf of the DoD to develop the CMMC implementation program. The CMMC AB has a memorandum of understanding with the DoD, and their tasks include training and certifying the CMMC assessors, as well as certifying the Certified Third-Party Assessment Organizations, also known as C3PAOs. The CMMC accreditation body will also review assessment results and issue and manage the CMMC certificates granted to the DoD contractors. The CMMC AB will develop the Centralized Body of Knowledge, or CMMC BOK, which will be a reference document with CMMC guidance. C3PAO assessors will be certified by the CMMC AB to assess DoD contractors. The assessors will conduct the contractor assessments based on the CMMC level assessment as requested by the DoD contractor. In the summer of 2020, the CMMC accreditation body will initiate the provisional program to train and certify the first class of 60 assessors for assessments up to CMMC Level 3. This first class will develop the DoD and CMMC accreditation body and help them to refine the training program. The formal training program will be released shortly after and leverage a partner network to scale training to meet the expected demand for CMMC assessors. Starting in 2020, the DoD will release new program solicitations with CMMC requirements. Approximately 10 new requests for information, or RFIs, will be released in the late June, early July timeframe, and 10 new requests for proposals, or RFPs, in the late October, early November timeframe. The number of RFX solicitations with CMMC requirements will continue to grow each year, and by 2026, all DoD programs are expected to have CMMC requirements. Let's review the CMMC levels, processes, and practices. CMMC certification requirements are defined for levels 1 through 5. Each CMMC level aligns with the type of program information that is to be protected, the sensitivity of the information, and the range of threats. A CMMC level is a combination of defined processes and practice requirements. CMMC practices are aligned with specific capabilities across 17 capability domains and a specific CMMC level. The DoD CMMC requirements documentation provides a breakdown by capability domain, a specific capability, the CMMC level, and the required practices, as shown on the slide. Capability domains range from access control to incident response, to physical protection, to system information, and information integrity. CMMC Level 1 addresses the safeguarding of federal contract information, also known as FCI. This level has 0 processes and 17 practices. CMMC Level 2 is more of a transition stage for contractors going from Level 1, safeguarding FCI, and working their way to protecting controlled, unclassified information. Level 2 has 2 processes and 72 practices. Moving on to CMMC Level 3, it addresses the protection of controlled, unclassified information, also known as CUI. Level 3 has 3 processes and 130 practices. Moving to Level 4, it includes the protection of CUI combined with processes and practices to reduce the risk from advanced persistent threats, or APTs. Level 4 has 4 processes and 156 practices for a proactive posture. And CMMC Level 5 builds upon Level 4 to even further increase the protection of CUI and reduce the risk of APTs. Level 5 has 5 processes and 171 practices for an advanced and progressive security posture. The CMMC requirements are aligned with Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, Clause 52.204-2021, NIST 800-171, the draft NIST 800-171B, and other compliance programs. Now let's look at CMMC and the DoD acquisition landscape. The organizational chart on the slide depicts the CMMC certification process, organizations, and alignment with DoD acquisition. As we reviewed previously, on the left, we have the U.S. DoD Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, who defined the CMMC requirements framework. Then the CMMC accreditation body, who acts on behalf of the DoD to implement the CMMC program, which includes training and certification. And then we have the C3PAOs and their assessors, who have been trained and licensed by the CMC accreditation body to conduct assessments. Next, at the top center of the chart, we have the US DoD programs that define the requirements for the RFX solicitations. Those are RFIs and RFPs. They will work with the DoD Office of the Undersecretary of Defense to incorporate CMMC requirements in the new program solicitations. The Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, also known as DFARS, and specifically Clause 252-204-7012 will be the mechanism to capture the CMMC requirement. Today, this rule includes requirements for NIST 800-171, FedRAMP moderate or equivalent controls when using a cloud service provider or CSP, such as AWS, and other requirements. Later this year, this clause will be revised to include the new DoD CMMC requirement. RFX solicitations will include the CMMC level requirements for the program. Next, in the center of the chart, we have the defense supply chain, which includes prime contractors, subcontractors, and the rest of the supply chain, including small businesses. These companies submit bids or responses to the DoD program solicitations. However, with CMMC, these companies will all be required to be CMMC certified for contract awards. The DoD CMMC accreditation body will be deploying a CMMC marketplace on their website for the defense supply chain companies to find and connect with certified third-party assessors, or C3PAOs. The company will contract directly with the C3PAO to conduct the assessment of their environment and processes for a specified CMMC level 1, 3, 4, 5. The licensed assessor provides their findings to the company and the CMMC accreditation body. The CMMC accreditation body, Certified Quality Auditor, or CQA, will review the assessment findings using defined criteria and established baselines. The CQA will be authorized to approve submissions and issue CMMC certificates at the appropriate level to the defense supply chain company. The company's CMMC certificate will be valid for 3 years. First, we reviewed the basics of the new DoD CMMC framework and the requirements. In this section, we will review how the AWS Cloud helps customers accelerate their CMMC compliance. Today, the DoD, the Defense Industrial Base, and the supply chain are using the AWS Cloud to run mission-critical workloads, whether it is the Defense Logistic Agency, who migrated 5 applications to the AWS GovCloud region, or the Navy ERP, who also recently migrated to the AWS GovCloud region, or Raytheon, who is accelerating their mission-critical development with the AWS Cloud. The AWS Cloud provides customers with secure, scalable, and cost-efficient solutions that are authorized to strict compliance requirements. We help customers increase their innovation by helping them focus on the transformational needs and challenges of their business, rather than the non-value add tasks of managing infrastructure. And by providing AWS services that speed up the innovation process. For example, services like Amazon SageMaker, a fully managed service that provides every developer and data scientist with the ability to build, train, and deploy machine learning models quickly. SageMaker removes the heavy lifting from each step of the machine learning process to make it easier to develop high-quality models. To help our customers improve their security posture, AWS provides services and supporting documentation guidance like our well-architected guides, white papers, quick starts, and more. The AWS Cloud provides customers with regions, availability zones, and services that have been authorized and are continuously reviewed by many of the compliance programs that our DIB or Defense Industrial Base and DoD customers are required to comply with. These include FedRAMP at moderate and high impact levels, and the DoD Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide, also known as SRG, at impact levels 2, 4, 5, and 6, and coming soon, CMMC. To help accelerate the deployment and compliance for mission-critical applications, we provide customers with supporting documentation, assets such as Quick Start, and programs like AT on AWS, which helps organizations navigate the authorization to operate process. All are designed to help customers efficiently navigate their compliance journey. AWS intends to provide compliance assets to help customers and partners accelerate their DoD CMMC compliance with the AWS Cloud. In addition, our goal is to help companies reduce the level of effort and cost for CMMC compliance by leveraging their existing investment in other compliance program authorizations. How will we do this? Well, first, AWS will provide CMMC compliance documentation that will include a CMMC Customer Responsibility Guide. This document lists the CMMC requirements, and based on our shared responsibility model, it outlines practices and processes that are either the customer's responsibility, an AWS responsibility, or a shared responsibility. We will also provide a CMMC compliance document template that customers can leverage as they prepare documentation for their own certification. Next, we will provide a list of controls and other reciprocity information that customers can leverage from existing AWS compliance program authorizations. At the time of this recording, the DoD and the CMMC accreditation body were still in the process of defining the guidelines around reciprocity from other compliance programs such as FedRAMP and others. And we will include C3PAO attestation for AWS regions and services and their alignment with the CMMC requirements. Second, to help accelerate the deployment and certification even further, AWS will provide the CMMC Quick Start package. In this package, we intend to provide Quick Start automation, which is comprised of AWS CloudFormation templates to model and quickly provision AWS resources in your cloud environment, and a supporting deployment guide. The package will also include a tailored AWS Customer Responsibility Guide specifically for the CMMC Quick Start configuration. We will also provide a CMMC reference architecture, as well as an AWS CMMC compliance document template configured with practice and process information based on the package configuration. Customers can leverage this documentation in support of their CMMC certification process. Customers will also have the option to engage with AWS professional services to help them with their AWS Cloud CMMC deployment. AWS continues to work with the DoD and CMMC accreditation body to collect additional compliance information and process details as they further develop the CMMC program. In addition, AWS partner network, technology, and consulting partners will also be providing CMMC solutions built on the AWS cloud and our services. I mentioned AWS CMMC assets we intend to provide. Here we share additional information and examples of these supporting assets and documentation. First, AWS Customer Responsibility Guides provide a breakdown of compliance program controls, or in the case of CMMC, practices, and the customer and/or AWS responsibility aligned with our shared responsibility model. To learn more about the AWS shared responsibility model, please follow the link provided. In addition, the Customer Responsibility Guide also aligns the controls with those of other compliance programs and specifications such as FedRAMP, NIST 800-53, NIST 800-171, etc. On the slide, we're showing the AWS CMMC Customer Responsibility Guide for CMMC. Once additional details are released by the DoD and the CMMC accreditation body, This guide will be updated and available for customers. Next, we look at Quick Starts, which helps customers deploy AWS and partner technologies into AWS Cloud, leveraging infrastructure as code concepts. AWS Quick Starts include AWS CloudFormation templates to automate the deployment, which reduces the manual tasks required to build the environment. A Quick Start also includes deployment instructions and architecture guides. On the slide, we have a snapshot of an AWS NIST Quick Start. The AWS CMMC Quick Start will be available soon. And last but not least, we have AWS reference architectures that provide guidance for customers to help them build applications and deploy workloads that leverage the AWS cloud. Reference architectures include a graphical depiction of the architecture as well as narratives on how the AWS services are used. In addition to our CMC compliance program, leveraging our AWS GovCloud Regions, customers can accelerate their DoD CMMC compliance, as well as address other program regulatory and compliance requirements. The AWS GovCloud Regions were purpose-built to address the compliance requirements at the federal, state, and local government levels. The regions also address the needs of DoD contractors and other U.S. customers that are running sensitive mission-critical workloads in the cloud. AWS GovCloud helps our DIB and supply chain customers address other compliance requirements, such as ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, FedRAMP, DoD Cloud Computing SRG, and the current DFARS 252.204-7012 requirements. For example, in support of ITAR requirements, the AWS GovCloud regions are managed by AWS resources that are U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. The AWS GovCloud regions are also FedRAMP High and DoD SRG Impact Level 5 authorized, and coming soon, CMMC and the revised DFARS clause. In addition, depending on the guidance for FedRAMP reciprocity from the DoD and the CMMC accreditation body, the region can potentially provide even greater CMMC practice inheritance and reciprocity. With the combination of the AWS GovCloud regions and our CMMC compliance assets, customers will not only accelerate their CMMC compliance, but also help address other potential DoD program requirements. Let's review the AWS CMC resources that are available to help customers learn more about CMMC and AWS solutions. First, we provided a link to our AWS CMMC compliance and FAQs page to help customers understand CMMC and AWS supporting solutions. We will continue to update this page as more details become available from the DoD and from the CMMC accreditation body. We will also share additional details on the AWS CMMC assets once they are available. On this page, you can also send a request to connect with the AWS team to learn more about our AWS CMMC solutions. For information on how AWS supports other compliance programs like those mentioned in this session, and many more, we included a link to the AWS Compliance Programs page. Next, to learn more on the AWS GovCloud region and how it can help with your CMMC compliance journey, as well as other compliance programs for the DoD, we shared a link to the AWS GovCloud page. And lastly, we also included links to the DoD CMMC and the CMMC accreditation body websites, where you can download the latest DoD CMMC framework documentation and also learn more on CMMC. Thank you for sharing your time with us today to review the new DoD Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework and how AWS can help you accelerate your compliance while reducing your level of effort and risk. My name is Ulysses Cubillos, and we look forward to working with you on your AWS Cloud and CMMC compliance journey. We also value your feedback. Please complete the session survey. Thank you.